Imagine, imagine opening a book that fundamentally rewired how human beings process thought.
Right, a really foundational text.
Exactly, like logic, language, everything. This isn't just some dusty old manuscript we're talking about
No,
tonight.
definitely not.
It's a text that shaped medieval education and, honestly, by extension, modern linguistics.
Oh, absolutely.
So you pick up this massive intellectual achievement, you flip to the cover to see the name of the genius who wrote it, and it's smudged.
Just completely erased by time.
Yes, erased by time. We have this towering, world-changing book, yet no one can entirely agree on who the author actually was.
It is wild.
It is. We don't know for sure where he was from. We don't definitively know what his day job was.
Right.
But there is one detail, like a single universally agreed upon fact, that makes this entire historical cold case just irresistible.
And that is?
Whoever this mysterious genius was, he spent his time tutoring a king.
It's the ultimate academic ghost story, really.
It really is. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are cracking open a 13th century mystery today.
To really get in the right headspace for this, I want you to picture a 13th century scriptorium.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Yeah, so you got the heavy smell of old parchment, right? And iron gall ink, candle wax.
Monks hunched over their desks, writing in the dark.
Exactly. But as we start pulling apart this mystery today, I want you to watch that dimly lit room slowly morph into like a modern linguistics lab.
Oh, wow.
Because the rules of logic this author codified in his masterpiece, which is called the Summa Lamberti, they aren't just medieval trivia.
They actually matter today.
They are completely foundational to how we understand human communication right now.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He tackled something that, honestly, artificial intelligence and modern philosophers still struggle with today.
Which is what?
How the messy, unspoken context of human life actually changes the literal meaning of the words coming out of our mouths.
That is fascinating. So today, in this deep dive, we're looking at these medieval manuscripts, a deeply contested identity, and this groundbreaking theory of language.
Let's do it.
And honestly, the best place to start is the name on the cover. Or I should say, the 4 different names.
Right, the identity crisis.
Depending on which manuscript you're reading or, which historian you happen to ask, the author is either Lambertus or Lambert of Lagny.
Or Lambert of Lagny.
Right. Or maybe Lambert of Auxerre.
The historical record is just incredibly fragmented here.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because it's honestly like a medieval, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
That is a perfect way to describe it. Scholars basically have to play detective.
So what clues do we actually have?
Well, the most vital clue, the one that anchors us, comes from a 14th century manuscript found in Padua.
Okay, Padua.
Yeah, specifically one cataloged as Codex 647. And at the very end of this manuscript, there's a colophon.
And a colophon is kind of like a publisher's note, right?
Exactly. It's the medieval equivalent of an author bio. And it explicitly states that the author named Lambert produced this text while he was the teacher of the King of Navarre.
The King of Navarre.
Okay. And it also mentions that he later edited the work while living in Paris.
So we have a name, Lambert, a location in Paris, and a royal pupil in Navarre.
Right.
It's a start, obviously, but how do historians leap from that tiny bio to actually dating the book?
They look at the pupil.
Oh, the king.
Yeah, historians like L.M. Deric, they were able to reverse engineer the timeline based entirely on that specific royal connection.
Because royal records are usually pretty solid?
Exactly. We have highly accurate records for royalty. The King of Navarre during that era was Theobald II.
Okay, Theobald II.
We know Theobald was born in 1240, he succeeded his father in 1253, and he was officially crowned in 1257.
So if Lambert was actively tutoring the young king before he took full power?
Scholars can comfortably place the composition of his logic textbook right in that sweet spot between 1250 and 1260.
Okay, I see the logic there. That makes sense. But tracing the king still leaves us with 2 wildly different biographies for Lambert himself.
Yes, it does.
Because modern historians have been arguing about this for decades, haven't they?
Oh, fiercely arguing. The academic community is completely split down the middle on this.
So what are the 2 sides?
Well, one camp strongly argues for Lambert of Auxerre.
And who was he?
If you buy into this theory, Lambert was a Dominican friar.
Okay, a monk.
Right. He spent his time from like 1247 to 1256, teaching young novices in a convent.
So he's drafting the Summa Lamberti as a training manual for these young monks.
Exactly. And somehow, while doing all that, he also lands the gig to tutor the soon-to-be king.
I mean, a monk writing a logic manual for other monks makes total sense for the time period.
It does.
But what about the other camp? What's the rival theory?
The rival theory argues he was Lambert of Lagny, and this version paints a completely different picture.
How so?
He isn't a cloistered monk at all. He's a secular clerk.
Oh, so he's out in the world.
Very much so. He's actively administering the king's holdings and estates. He tutors Theobald out in Pamplona, managing all these complex royal affairs.
Wow, okay.
And in this theory, he only joins the Dominican order much later in his life.
So we have a cloistered monk versus a worldly clerk.
Yeah, and the debate over whether he was from Auxerre or Lagny has bounced back and forth so many times that modern scholars eventually just threw their hands up.
Really? They just gave up.
Pretty much. To avoid taking a side, they officially just refer to him as Lambert.
That is, I mean, the irony is almost painful.
How so?
You have a man whose entire legacy is built on the absolute precise definition of terms.
Oh, right.
And history can't even provide a precise definition for his own identity.
That is a very good point.
But, let's leave the biographical squabbling aside and just call him Lambert. What really strikes me is the sheer scale of what he accomplished.
It's massive.
Right, because whether he was a clerk or a monk, he was constantly rubbing shoulders with immense royal power.
Oh.
Tutoring Theobald II wasn't just some side gig. He was actively shaping the mind of a monarch.
Absolutely.
And yet, his real legacy isn't political at all. It's this book, the Summa Lamberti.
What's fascinating here is that despite the murky biography, his textbook, often just called the Logica, is incredibly important.
Why was it such a big deal?
To understand that, we have to look at the intellectual battleground of the 13th century.
Okay, set the stage.
This wasn't just a random textbook. It's considered one of the big four manuscripts that drove a massive paradigm shift in human reasoning between 1240 and 1270.
Okay, wait. A paradigm shift from what to what exactly?
Good question.
Because I know the sources talk about a move from the old logic to the logic of the moderns, but what were the actual stakes here?
The stakes were quite literally how human beings uncover the truth.
Oh, wow. No pressure.
Right. For centuries, the academic world operated on the logic of Vetus, the old logic.
Which was what?
This was heavily based on the original translations of Aristotle. It was very broad. It focused heavily on universal categories.
Like big picture philosophical concepts.
Exactly. But in the 13th century, scholars realized that if you want to win an argument or prove a philosophical truth, broad categories just aren't enough.
You need something sharper.
You need surgical precision. And this birthed the Logica Modernorum, the modern logic, which was dominated by what we call the Terminist period.
Terminist. Meaning referring to individual terms.
Yeah.
Like zooming in on a microscopic level of a sentence.
Exactly. Terminist logic shifted the entire focus of philosophy down to the granular properties of individual words, the terms themselves.
I see.
Before you can debate these grand ideas, you have to understand exactly how a single word operates,
Right.
how it combines with another word to build a proposition, and how those propositions lock together to form a syllogism.
Hold on, let's ground that for a second for the listener.
Sure.
When you say syllogism, we're talking about the classic logical structure, right?
Right.
Like all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Precisely. That's a steel-word syllogism. Now, the old logic cared about the broad validity of that entire three-step structure.
Did the whole thing make sense?
Yes. But the terminist logic of Lambert's era, they stopped the train before it even left the station.
What do you mean?
A terminist would look at that and say, wait a minute. In the phrase, all men are mortal, what exactly does the term men stand for?
Oh, I see.
Are we talking about the abstract universal concept of mankind? Or are we talking about a physical collection of guys standing in a room?
Right, because those are two very different things.
Exactly. If you and I don't agree on exactly what the atomic unit, the term itself, is doing, the whole argument collapses.
So terminist logic is basically treating language like chemistry.
Oh, I like that.
They're like isolating the elements to see how they react.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Summa Lamberti was essentially the ultimate chemistry textbook for medieval students.
It must have been popular.
Extremely. It survives in at least 15 different manuscripts today, which means it was a blockbuster hit in the 13th century university scene.
A medieval bestseller.
Absolutely. Lambert is grouped with his famous contemporaries, guys like Peter of Spain, Roger Bacon, and William of Sherwood.
The rock stars of medieval philosophy.
Basically.
But the sources indicate Lambert had a very different vibe from those guys, especially in how he actually taught the material.
He did.
Because William of Sherwood was famous for being incredibly concise, like almost to a fault.
Right. Very brief.
And Peter of Spain wrote a book that became one of the most reprinted textbooks in history, but he was notorious for falling into this intense, suffocating pedantry.
Yes. And that is where Lambert's genius as a tutor really shines through.
How so?
He struck a beautiful pedagogical balance. He was known for giving slightly fuller, more detailed explanations than Sherwood,
Okay.
but without ever dragging the student into the weeds of pedantry like Peter of Spain sometimes did.
He kept it practical.
Exactly. He knew how to explain complex mechanics without making the student lose the plot.
Which makes total sense if you remember who his student was.
Right, the king.
Yeah, if you are tutoring a teenage king, you can't afford to bore him to death with endless pedantry.
Definitely not.
But you also can't skip the details because this kid is going to grow up and, negotiate treaties.
Right, the stakes are real.
You have to be clear, practical, and engaging.
Exactly. And that practical focus leads us right to the core mechanism of his entire philosophy.
Okay, let's get into it.
If we are treating words like chemical elements, we have to understand their fundamental property. And in medieval logic, that property is called supposition.
Supposition. So basically, the anchor.
Yes.
It's the mechanism of how an abstract, invisible word hooks onto a tangible, real-world object.
Right. Lambert actually breaks down 4 different ways the word supposition can be used in grammar.
4 ways.
Yeah, but he forcefully dismisses the first 3. He says that for a logician, only the 4th definition matters.
And what is that 4th definition?
Proper logical supposition is the acceptance of a term for itself, for its signified thing, or for the things contained under it.
So establishing exactly what the word is standing in for.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's how Lambert categorizes the different types of supposition. The one that immediately jumped out to me in the research was his concept of natural supposition.
Yes, that's a big one.
Lambert defines this as the meaning a term has completely of its own nature. Like when it is uttered entirely by itself, adjoined to absolutely no other word.
And we really have to pause here because in the 13th century, that was a remarkably bold claim.
Why was it bold?
Because many logicians at the time firmly believed that a word didn't actually do anything.
Like it had no power on its own.
Right. They thought it couldn't stand for anything in reality unless it was physically placed inside a sentence.
Ah, I see.
But Lambert argues against that. He says a word, just sitting there in isolation, still possesses an inherent property that corresponds to its meaning.
Okay, I think the best way to visualize what Lambert is arguing here is to picture a car sitting completely idle in a garage.
A car in a garage, okay.
Just sitting there in the dark, doing nothing. It still has the potential to drive, right?
Right.
It has an engine, it has wheels, it has an ignition. Driving is fundamentally in its nature, even if it isn't currently moving.
Oh, I like this.
That is natural supposition.
Mm.
A word sitting isolated in a dictionary, like the word horse, has an innate signification. It has the potential to mean something.
Yes.
But the car only actually goes somewhere once you tune the key and pull it out onto the road. So for Lambert, the word only does its active logical work once you put it into a sentence.
I love that framing. The dictionary definition is the car in the garage.
Exactly.
But if you take that car out of the garage, you have to drive it in the real world, and the real world is full of messy, specific obstacles.
Right. Traffic, potholes.
And this leads us to the most controversial part of Lambert's theory, how he handles discrete supposition.
Okay, yes. This is where modern scholars look back at his work and get genuinely frustrated with him.
They really do.
They accuse him of being totally inconsistent.
Yeah, they do. So discrete supposition deals with highly specific, individualized terms.
Give me an example.
The examples Lambert uses are phrases like, Socrates runs, or this man runs.
Okay.
You aren't talking about men as a broad category anymore. You are literally pointing your finger at one specific discrete entity standing right in front of you.
Right. That specific guy.
So Lambert categorizes discrete supposition as a form of personal supposition, and crucially, he calls it accidental.
Accidental.
Yeah, and modern scholars look at that and say, wait, that's incoherent.
I want to push back on those modern scholars, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Why do they think it's incoherent to call it accidental What rule is he supposedly breaking here?
Well, this raises an important question about logic. To a strict modern logician, language is supposed to be a system of generalizable, abstract rules.
Right, like math.
Exactly. When you use the name Socrates, you are taking a universal linguistic tool, a noun, and attaching it to a highly specific, flesh and blood human being.
Who will eventually die and disappear.
Right. So to modern minds, categorizing the physical act of pointing at a temporary object under the same umbrella as timeless, abstract, logical rules feels incredibly messy.
They think he's mixing things up.
They think he is confusing the pure math of language with the physical act of pointing.
But see, I disagree that it's incoherent. I actually think Lambert was just being radically realistic.
Radically realistic? How so?
He wasn't being messy. He was acknowledging that human beings are messy.
That's a strong point. So you think he was intentionally trying to bridge that gap?
Absolutely. Think about his day job.
The tutor.
Yes.
Yeah.
He isn't just sitting in a dark room solving math equations on parchment. He's advising a royal court.
Right.
He's teaching a king how to govern. He knows that pure, pristine logic is completely useless if it can't deal with the messy reality of physical objects and specific people.
That makes a lot of sense.
We don't spend our lives speaking in abstract universals. We talk about the guy standing across the room. We talk about this man. So calling it accidental makes sense to me because the physical world is accidental and temporary.
You know, when you frame it through his role as a royal tutor, his theoretical choices suddenly look incredibly practical.
Exactly.
He was basically forcing the pristine logic of the ancients to get its hands dirty in the real world.
Which brings us to what might be the absolute crown jewel of the Summa Lamberti.
Oh, definitely.
Because if a word has a natural meaning, if it's that car in the garage we talked about, what actually happens to that meaning when human beings start talking to each other in a specific lived environment?
Right. How does the real world mutate that dictionary definition?
Exactly.
And this introduces Lambert's concept of restriction. In Terminist logic, the range of what a term stands for isn't fixed.
It can change.
Right. It can be ampliated, which means expanded, or it can be restricted, which means shrunk down.
And Lambert maps out two distinct types of restriction, right?
The first one is fairly mathematical. He calls it natural restriction.
Okay, how does that work?
This happens when a term's meaning is shrunk down simply by adding another word to it.
Like an adjective.
Exactly. The classic example is the word cat. On its own, cat encompasses every single feline currently living on planet Earth.
Every cat everywhere.
Right. But if you add an adjective and say calico cat, you have naturally restricted the term.
You've shrunk it down.
Yes. You've shrunk the supposition from all cats down to a very specific subset just based on the grammar on the page.
That makes sense. It's mechanical.
Totally.
But then he introduces the second type. And this is where Lambert pulls light years ahead of his peers.
Oh, this is the best part.
He introduces use-based restriction, or usualses.
Right.
And use-based restriction has absolutely nothing to do with adding adjectives or changing the grammar.
No, it doesn't.
It is restricted entirely by the unspoken context of the situation.
The example Lambert provides in the text is just stunning because it is so incredibly simple.
What's the example?
He says, imagine someone runs into a room and yells, "The king is coming." Logically, purely by the dictionary definition, the word king broadly refers to every male monarch.
Right.
But in that specific moment, the person yelling doesn't mean every king in human history is about to walk through the door.
Right. They aren't expecting the ghost of Charlemagne to show up.
Exactly. The grammar of the sentence doesn't restrict the word.
So what does?
What restricts it is the shared reality of the speaker and the listener.
Ah.
The specific country they are standing in, specific year they are living in, that unspoken context automatically restricts the word king to mean the current ruler of that specific land.
So what does this all mean? I was honestly absolutely blown away when I read this.
It's so brilliant.
Because Lambert basically isolated the concept of reading the room and turned it into a formal logical rule.
Yes.
And if you think about it, we do this 100 times a day.
Oh, easily.
Like if I tell a coworker, hey, I'm going to the city this weekend, I don't have to specify which city.
Nope.
I don't have to use natural restriction and say the city of Manhattan.
Yep.
Because if we both live in New Jersey, my coworker inherently knows I mean New York.
Exactly.
But if we live in Oakland, they know I mean San Francisco.
Yep.
The grammar is identical in both scenarios. But the context does all the heavy lifting. The meaning of my words shrinks based entirely on where I am physically standing when I say them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what's truly wild about this is the historical timeline.
When was he writing?
Lambert is writing this in the 1250s.
Wow.
Formal scientific disciplines like pragmatics and sociolinguistics, which study exactly this phenomenon of how context contributes to meaning, they wouldn't exist for centuries.
Centuries.
Yet here's this medieval tutor realizing that a system of logic couldn't just live on paper. It had to account for human context.
Why do you think he caught this when the other big four missed it?
That's a great question.
Because the sources note that this specific concept of use-based restriction isn't found in the works of his highly famous contemporaries, like William of Sherwood or Peter of Spain.
Right, it's missing from their work.
It was a uniquely Lambert innovation.
I think it goes right back to your point earlier about his environment.
The royal court.
Yes. Sherwood and Peter of Spain were deeply embedded in the academic university system.
Okay.
When you are debating other scholars in a formalized setting, you treat logic like a rigid game of chess.
Very structured.
But Lambert was bridging the gap between the university and the royal court. He saw firsthand that language is fundamentally a partnership.
A partnership. I like that.
The meaning of a sentence isn't just contained in the syllables. It requires the shared environment of the speaker and the listener to activate it fully.
Wow.
He realized that context isn't a distraction from logic. Context is logic.
It is just incredible to step back and look at the whole picture.
It really is.
We started this deep dive with a man who is literally a blur in the history books.
A smudged name on a cover.
Right. We don't know his hometown. We don't know if he wore the robes of a monk or the clothes of a clerk.
Nope.
But we know what shaped the mind of King Theobald II.
We do know that.
And more importantly, he sat down and wrote a textbook that cracked the code on how human beings actually communicate.
He really did.
He took the lofty, high-minded philosophy of Aristotle and dragged it down into the mud and reality of how you and I actually speak to one another.
He proved that you just can't divorce language from the people using it.
Yeah.
And that is the thought I want to leave you with today.
Okay, let's hear it.
After this deep dive is over, just pay attention to the conversations you have.
Yeah, notice how you talk.
Whether you are firing off a quick text to a friend, or talking to your partner in the kitchen, or just ordering a coffee, ask yourself how much of the truth of what you are communicating is actually contained in the strict dictionary definitions of the words you are using.
Probably not as much as you think.
Exactly. And how much of it relies entirely on the invisible, unspoken context, the shared reality between you and the person listening.
That is a great thing to think about. We might never know for sure whose name belongs on the cover of the Summa Lamberti.
We probably won't.
But 800 years later, we know exactly how his mind worked.
We certainly do.
And every single time we rely on the context of the room to make ourselves understood, we are proving Lambert right.